Captain Jake Miller stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching Jupiter's red storms swirl through the main screen. His ship had been out here for 3 weeks, checking the outer system for anything unusual. The Deep Space Patrol was supposed to be quiet work, but Jake had learned that space never stayed quiet for long. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Lisa Park from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, and her voice carried that careful tone she used when she wasn't sure what she was seeing. "It's a signal, but not like anything in our databases." Jake walked over to her console. The display showed wave patterns that looked almost like music, but with frequencies that made no sense. "Where's it coming from?" "That's the weird part," Lisa said, pointing at her screen. "It's coming from everywhere and nowhere, like the signal is just appearing in space around us." Before Jake could respond, the patterns suddenly changed. The display filled with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Then, without warning, words appeared in broken English. "Attention, primitive vessel. You will stop movement. You will prepare for inspection. You will comply with Galactic Council authority." The bridge went silent. Jake felt his heart speed up, but he kept his voice steady. "Lisa, can you trace the source now?" She worked at her controls for a moment. "Captain, there's a ship out there, a big one. It just appeared about 50,000 kilometers off our port side." On screen, the view changed, and Jake heard someone whistle softly behind him. The alien ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of the New Horizon. It looked like someone had grown it rather than built it, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to shift color as they watched. "Open a channel," Jake ordered. The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that definitely wasn't human. The creature had 4 arms, skin that looked like purple metal, and eyes that glowed with their own light. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English, though the voice sounded like it was coming from inside a cave. "I am Commander Vextar, of the Galactic Council Inspection Fleet. Your species has been observed. You are found to be dangerous and primitive. You will surrender your vessel for evaluation." Jake stepped forward. "I'm Captain Jake Miller of the United Earth Space Force. We're on a peaceful mission in our own solar system. We don't recognize any authority called the Galactic Council." The alien's glowing eyes seemed to focus on him with something like surprise. "You speak as if you have choice in this matter. Your species has been marked for containment. You wage war against your own kind. You poison your own world. You show no connection to the universal consciousness that all advanced beings share." "We're not perfect," Jake admitted, "but we're trying to do better. We've had peace on Earth for over 30 years now. We're exploring space to learn, not to conquer." Commander Vexitar made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded like metal scraping against stone. 30 years of peace after thousands of years of war. You call this progress. Your species lacks the divine spark that marks true intelligence. You cannot hear the great pattern that connects all thinking beings. Jake didn't understand what the alien meant by the great pattern, but he recognized contempt when he heard, "Hey, maybe we're different from other species you've met. That doesn't make us dangerous." "Different," Vextar repeated. "Yes, you are different. You are isolated from the universal mind. You think only as individuals. This makes you unpredictable and violent. It is why your kind must be contained until you evolve beyond your savage nature." The communication cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Jake turned to his crew. "Lisa, get me a line to Earth Command, Priority 1. Tell them we have a first contact situation, and it's not going well." Over the next several hours, more alien ships appeared. They surrounded the New Horizon but didn't attack. Instead, they seemed to be studying the human vessel like scientists examining a dangerous specimen. Lisa managed to establish communications with several different alien species. Each conversation followed the same pattern. The aliens were polite, but firm. Humans were too primitive and violent to join galactic civilization. They had to be isolated for the safety of everyone else. "Captain," said Pete Adams, the ship's science officer, "I've been analyzing their technology. It's incredibly advanced, but there's something strange about it. All their ships seem to be connected somehow, like they're all part of one big machine." Jake nodded. That fits with what they said about universal consciousness. They're all linked together somehow, and they can't understand why we're not. 3 days later, a new ship arrived. This one was even larger than the others, and it had a different design. Where the other ships looked grown, this one looked ancient, as if it had been carved from a single piece of dark stone. An elderly alien appeared on their screen. This one looked almost human, except for the silver skin and the eyes that seemed to hold starlight. When it spoke, its voice was gentle but carried absolute authority. I am Elder Quixmar of the Thren civilization. We have observed your species for some time now. We have come to make you an offer. Jake felt a small spark of hope. We're listening. Your species will be relocated to a preserve world where you can develop in isolation. You will be given time to evolve beyond your current limitations. If in perhaps 1,000 years you develop the ability to join the great pattern of consciousness, you may be reconsidered for membership in galactic society. And if we refuse? Elder Quixmar's expression didn't change. Then your system will be isolated by barriers you cannot cross. You will remain here until you learn wisdom or destroy yourselves. The choice is yours. Jake looked around at his crew. He saw anger in some faces, fear in others, but also something else. Determination. These aliens thought they knew everything about humans, but they were wrong about one thing. Humans didn't give up easily. Elder Quixmar, Jake said carefully, before we make any decisions, I'd like to request something. Give us a chance to prove we're not what you think we are. Let us show you what humanity is really capable of. The alien tilted its head. What do you propose? A demonstration? Not of our technology or our weapons, but of something else, something you might not have seen before. And what is this something? Jake smiled, though he wasn't sure the alien would understand the expression. Let us show you how humans really think, how we solve problems, how we create and dream and hope. Give us that chance, and I think you'll be surprised. Elder Quixmar was quiet for a long moment. Finally, it nodded. Very well, you will be given one opportunity to demonstrate your worth. But know this, Captain Miller. If you fail, the isolation of your species will be permanent. Do you accept these terms? Jake took a deep breath. The fate of humanity now rested on whatever they could prove to these alien judges. We accept. The testing facility appeared around them like a dream becoming real. One moment the human team was aboard their transport ship, and the next they stood in a vast chamber that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls glowed with soft light, and the floor felt solid but looked like it was made of captured starlight. Dr. Ben Carter adjusted his equipment pack and looked around in wonder. He was a physicist from MIT, chosen for the team because he could think outside normal rules. Next, to him stood Maya Rodriguez, an engineer who could fix anything that had ever been broken. Sam Johnson, a poet and philosopher from Berkeley, carried only a small notebook and looked completely calm. Tony Brooks, the former Marine sergeant, kept his eyes moving, watching for threats that might not exist. Welcome to Nexus Prime, said Elder Quixmar. The ancient alien stood before them in a body that looked more solid than it had on the ship's screen. This facility has tested every species that sought to join galactic civilization. Most pass easily. Some do not pass at all. Around them, other aliens watched from raised platforms. Jake recognized Commander Vexistar among them, along with creatures he had never seen before. Some looked like living crystals, others like beings made of pure energy barely contained in humanoid shapes. The first test measures your ability to work with advanced technology, Elder Quixmar explained. A section of the floor rose up, forming a table covered with alien devices. These machines are broken. Fix them using only what is provided. Maya stepped forward, her engineer's instincts taking over. The devices looked nothing like human technology. They were smooth and curved, with no visible buttons or screens. When she touched one, it felt warm and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Ben, take a look at this, she called. These energy readings don't make sense. Dr. Carter pulled out his instruments and began taking measurements. The power source is something I've never seen before. It's like they're drawing energy from empty space itself. While the two humans worked, the alien observers talked among themselves in voices that sounded like music mixed with static. Jake could catch some of their words through the translation device. They approach it so strangely, one said. See how they cooperate without the pattern link, said another. It should be impossible. Maya and Ben worked for 2 hours, taking apart the alien machines and putting them back together in ways that made the watching aliens very uncomfortable. Instead of trying to understand the technology the way it was designed, they rebuilt it to work the way human minds could grasp it. There, Maya said finally. That should do it. The machines hummed to life, but not in the way they had before. The aliens looked confused. The devices worked perfectly, but they worked in patterns that no alien had ever seen. Interesting, Elder Quixmar said. You have made our technology work, but you have changed it in the process. This is not how other species approach the problem. We fix things by understanding them our own way, Maya explained. Sometimes that means changing them a little. The second test began immediately. The room changed around them, becoming a circular chamber with symbols glowing on every surface. In the center stood a pillar of light that seemed to sing with voices from across the galaxy. This is the great pattern, Elder Quixmar said. All intelligent species can touch it to some degree. It connects every thinking being in the galaxy. Through it, we share knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Touch the pattern and show us your connection to universal consciousness. Sam Johnson stepped forward first. He placed his hand on the pillar of light and closed his eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. The pillar continued to sing, but Sam remained separate from it, like a person trying to hear music through thick glass. Tony tried next, then Maya, then Ben. Each time the result was the same. The humans could see the pattern, could even touch it, but they couldn't join it. They remained stubbornly individual, locked inside their own minds. The alien observers began to murmur. Some sounded disappointed, others almost frightened. It is as we expected, said a voice from the crystal beings. They are deaf to the universal mind. They cannot evolve beyond their isolation. They are broken, added another alien, trapped in single consciousness while all other beings can join the greater whole. Elder Quixmar looked sad but not surprised. I am sorry, humans. This confirms what we suspected. Without connection to the pattern, you cannot truly be considered intelligent in the way the galaxy measures such things. But Sam Johnson raised his hand. Wait, we'd like to request something. What do you request? Permission to show you something we call the human frequency. It might not be what you expect, but it's how we connect to something greater than ourselves. The aliens looked at each other. Finally, Elder Quixmar nodded. You may try, but understand that this is your final chance to prove your species deserves consideration. Sam pulled out his notebook and began to write. As he worked, he started to speak. His words weren't directed at the aliens or even at his human companions. He seemed to be speaking to the air itself, to the fabric of space around them. He talked about numbers and music, about the way light bends around stars and the patterns that snowflakes make. He spoke of human dreams and human fears, of the way people love each other despite knowing that love could cause pain. What is he doing? One of the aliens asked. Maya, Ben, and Tony had heard Sam speak like this before, during their preparation for the mission. They knew what was coming. Sam wasn't trying to connect to the existing pattern. He was creating something entirely new. Back on Earth, Dr. Susan Walsh sat in the communications center, coordinating with human settlements across the planet. She had been waiting for this moment. All stations, she broadcast on a frequency that reached every human outpost from Mars to the research stations beyond Pluto. It's time. Begin the frequency. On Earth, millions of humans began to add their voices to what Sam had started. Musicians played, scientists calculated, artists painted, writers wrote, and children sang. Each person contributed what they did best, but they weren't trying to join some existing universal mind. They were building something that had never existed before. The pattern pillar in the testing chamber began to change. New harmonies appeared. In its song, frequencies that the great pattern had never known. The alien observers stepped back in amazement as colors they had no names for began to swirl around the humans. "Impossible," whispered Commander Vextar. "They're not joining the pattern, they're making it grow." Sam's voice grew stronger as more humans across the solar system added their own thoughts and dreams to the frequency. The chamber filled with something that was part music, part mathematics, part pure imagination, and part stubborn human hope. "We don't connect to your pattern," Sam said, his words carrying across dimensions the aliens didn't know existed. "We create our own patterns. And when we do, we invite the universe to dream new dreams." The test was over, but no one could say whether the humans had passed or failed. They had done something that changed the very rules of what the test was supposed to measure. The chamber on Nexus Prime had gone completely silent. Even the great pattern's constant singing had stopped, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The alien observers stared at the humans with expressions that ranged from wonder to fear to something that might have been awe. Sam Johnson stood in the center of the room, his notebook still open in his hands. The words he had spoken continued to echo in dimensions that the aliens were only beginning to understand. Around him, his 3 human companions felt the connection to their homeworld growing stronger with each passing moment. Elder Quicksmar was the first to speak. His ancient voice shook slightly. "What have you done?" "We've shown you what we are," Sam replied simply. "Humans don't join existing patterns. We make new ones." On Earth, the frequency that Sam had started was spreading, beyond anything Dr. Susan Walsh had planned. In Hawaii, musician Kate Wilson sat on the beach with her guitar, adding melodies that seemed to come from the ocean itself. Her music flowed into the growing pattern, carrying the sound of waves and the feeling of warm sand between bare toes. High, in the mountains of Tibet, philosopher David Lee meditated in a monastery that had stood for 1,000 years. His thoughts joined the frequency without words, bringing the wisdom of silence and the peace that comes from understanding how small and how important each person really is. In Africa, storyteller Grace Adams gathered children around her as she always did at sunset. But tonight her stories traveled farther than ever before. Tales of heroes and monsters, of love and loss, of the dreams that keep people going when everything seems hopeless. Her words carried the heartbeat of humanity itself. At a research station near the North Pole, scientist Paul Young worked with equations that described the beauty of ice crystals and the mathematics of aurora lights. His numbers danced with Kate's, music with David's wisdom, with Grace's stories, creating something that was bigger than any of them alone. Back on Nexus Prime, the aliens watched in growing amazement as the human frequency began to change their testing chamber. The walls that had been solid light now showed images from Earth. Sunsets and storms, children laughing, couples holding hands, old people sharing stories, artists creating beauty from pain. Commander Vexitar stepped closer to the humans, his forearms trembling. "Your people are not connected to the great pattern, yet they coordinate perfectly. How is this possible?" Tony Brooks answered for the group. "We don't need to be in each other's heads to work together. We understand each other because we choose to. We learn to care about people we've never met because that's what makes us human." The crystalline beings who had dismissed humanity so quickly were now pulsing with colors that showed deep confusion. One of them spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "They are creating new frequencies in the pattern, frequencies that have never existed before." "Not in the pattern," Maya Rodriguez corrected. "We're creating something new alongside it, something that doesn't replace what you have but adds to it." Dr. Ben Carter pulled out his instruments and began taking readings of the energy around them. "The space-time structure is actually changing," he announced. "We're not just making music or sharing thoughts. We're literally expanding the dimensions that consciousness can exist in." The human frequency continued to grow. From space stations orbiting Earth, astronauts added their unique perspective of looking at their home world from above. From underwater research facilities, marine biologists contributed the songs of whales and the mystery of deep ocean trenches. Each human voice, that joined the frequency brought something different. Farmers brought the patience of watching seeds grow. Teachers brought the joy of seeing understanding dawn in a student's eyes. Doctors brought the determination to fight against death and suffering. Children brought wonder at butterflies and the conviction that adults needed to do better. But it wasn't just individual humans adding to the frequency. Human cultures themselves began to resonate. The ancient rhythms of African drums spoke to the precise timing of Swiss clockmakers. The flowing poetry of Arabic calligraphy harmonized with the bold strokes of Japanese brush painting. Celtic melodies, wove together with Native American chants, with Indian classical music, with the blues born from American slavery. On Nexus Prime, Sam's voice had become the center of something vast and growing. His words were no longer just his own. They carried the voices of every human who had ever looked up at stars and wondered what was out there. They carried the dreams of every person who had ever imagined something better than what they had. "We are not one mind sharing many bodies," Sam said, and his words seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We are many minds choosing to dream the same dream. We are billions of separate souls deciding that together we can create something beautiful." The alien observers began to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Species had joined the Great Pattern for millions of years, adding their voices to an existing universal consciousness. But humans were creating a parallel form of awareness, one that valued individual uniqueness as much as unity. Elder Zephyri of the Energy Beings spoke for the first time since the demonstration began. Her voice was like the birth of stars. They do not simply commune with divinity. They speak as divinity, creating new forms of meaning through their separation and their choice to connect despite that separation. The Great Pattern itself began to change. Where it had been one steady flow of universal consciousness, it now had currents and eddies, places where new thoughts could form. The human frequency hadn't replaced anything, but it had shown the pattern, new ways to grow. "We called you savages," Elder Quixmar said quietly. "We thought your isolation from universal consciousness made you primitive and dangerous." "Maybe we are dangerous," Sam admitted, "but not in the way you thought. We're dangerous to the idea that there's only one way for minds to connect. We're dangerous to the belief that consciousness has limits." The demonstration reached its peak as humans across the solar system added their final contributions to the frequency. The pattern they had created was visible now, not just as sound or energy, but as pure meaning itself. It showed the aliens what human consciousness really was. Not a single mind or even a collection of minds, but a way of thinking that could create new realities through imagination, hope, and the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The human frequency stabilized. The aliens realized that the galaxy had just become a very different place. They had been guardians of existing consciousness, but humans had shown them that consciousness itself could evolve in ways they had never imagined. The test was over, but everyone understood that what had really been tested was not humanity's worthiness to join galactic civilization. What had been tested was whether the galaxy was ready to grow beyond what it had always been, and that test had only just begun. 6 months had passed since the demonstration on Nexus Prime, and the galaxy was still learning how to understand what had happened. The Galactic Council Chamber, once filled with the steady harmonies of the Great Pattern, now buzzed with new frequencies that no one had heard before. Captain Jake Miller stood before the assembled aliens, but he was no longer just representing a small human exploration ship. He now spoke for a species that had changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about consciousness and intelligence. Elder Quixmar looked older than before, but there was something new in his starlight eyes, something that might have been excitement mixed with the wisdom of eons. "Captain Miller, the Council has spent these months debating what your species has shown us. The decision was not easy. Around the chamber, representatives from hundreds of worlds watched the proceedings. Some still looked uncertain about humanity. Others seemed eager to learn from the strange species that created rather than joined universal consciousness. Commander Vextar stood to speak. His purple metallic skin had taken on new colors since he had been exposed to the human frequency. For 3 million years, species have joined our galaxy by connecting to the Great Pattern. It was the only way we knew to measure true intelligence. Then humans showed us that intelligence itself could grow in directions we never imagined. Dr. Ben Carter, now serving as Earth's chief science liaison, had spent the past months working with alien researchers who wanted to understand human creativity. The results had surprised everyone. Several species discovered they could learn to think in new ways, breaking free from patterns they had followed for thousands of years. The crystalline beings have been the most interesting to work with, Ben reported to the council. They've always thought in perfect geometric patterns, but when they tried human-style creative thinking, they started growing new crystal formations that are both beautiful and more efficient than anything they had before. Maya Rodriguez had been even busier. Alien engineers from across the galaxy wanted to learn her approach to problem-solving. Instead of just understanding existing technology, they were learning to redesign it, to make it work in ways its creators had never intended. We've got requests from 47 different species for engineering exchange programs, Maya told the council. They want to learn how to fix things by changing them instead of just restoring them to original design. But it was Sam Johnson's work that had caused the biggest changes in galactic society. The poet-philosopher had been traveling from world to world, teaching aliens how to create rather than just participate in consciousness. The results had been revolutionary. On the crystal world of Nexar Prime, beings who had thought in mathematical precision for millions of years were now creating art that made viewers feel emotions they had no names for. On the gas giant stations of the ethereal collective, creatures of pure energy were learning to tell stories that changed the very structure of their beings. What we're seeing, Sam explained to the council, is that consciousness isn't fixed. It's not something you just connect to or join. It's something you can grow, change, and create new versions of. Every species has been following the same old paths for so long that they forgot they could make new ones. Tony Brooks had found his own role in the new galactic order. His military experience helped him work with species that were afraid of the changes humanity had brought. Some aliens worried that breaking free from established patterns would lead to chaos and conflict. Change is scary, Tony acknowledged. But humans learned something important through all our wars and struggles. Sometimes you have to break old systems to build better ones. The trick is learning how to do it without destroying what's worth keeping. Elder Zephyri of the Energy Beings had become humanity's strongest supporter on the council. Her species, which existed as pure consciousness, had been fascinated by the human ability to create new forms of awareness. Humans have shown us that consciousness is not a destination but a journey, she told the assembled delegates. For too long we believed that joining the Great Pattern was the end goal of evolution. Now we understand it was only the beginning. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species, led by the conservative factions, still wanted to isolate humanity. They argued that human unpredictability was dangerous, that allowing consciousness to change freely would lead to chaos. But other species had already begun experimenting with human-style creativity. They had tasted the freedom of making new patterns instead of just following old ones, and they didn't want to give that up. Finally, Elder Quixmar called for silence. The council has reached a decision. Humanity will not be isolated or placed under restriction. Instead, we propose something that has never been done in galactic history. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the chamber. We propose a new form of galactic civilization, one that includes both the Great Pattern and what humans have taught us to call the creative manifold. Species can choose to remain connected to existing universal consciousness, or they can learn to create new forms of awareness, or they can do both. The chamber erupted in discussion. The idea was revolutionary. Instead of one universal way of thinking, the galaxy would now support multiple forms of consciousness existing side by side. Captain Jake Miller felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Dr. Susan Walsh, who had arrived from Earth to witness the final decision. "So what happens now?" she asked. Jake smiled. "Now we go exploring. But not just new worlds this time. New ways of thinking, new forms of consciousness, new possibilities that nobody has imagined yet." 3 weeks later, the newly commissioned vessel Boundless Dawn prepared to launch from the joint human-alien shipyard orbiting Saturn. The ship itself was a marvel of combined technology, built using human creativity and alien knowledge working together. Captain Jake Miller stood on the bridge, looking at his mixed crew of humans and aliens. His first officer was Commander Vextar, who had requested the transfer after experiencing human consciousness during the demonstration. The science team included both Dr. Ben Carter and a crystalline being named Resonance of New Thoughts, who had learned to think in ways its species had never known before. Maya Rodriguez had designed engines that worked by creating new forms of space-time rather than just traveling through existing space. Sam Johnson served as what they called a consciousness navigator, helping the crew explore new forms of awareness they encountered. Their mission was unlike anything in galactic history. They would travel not just to new worlds, but to new dimensions of thought and awareness that the combination of human creativity and alien wisdom might discover. As the Boundless Dawn prepared to depart, Sam Johnson made the final log entry of their preparation phase. We were called savages because they thought our struggle meant we were broken. They didn't understand that sometimes you have to break free from the divine to speak with your own divine voice. Now we go forward together, not as conquerors or subjects, but as consciousness itself learning to dream new dreams. The ship launched toward the galactic center, where ancient mysteries waited to be explored by minds that could now think in ways the universe had never seen before. Behind them, the galaxy began to sing with harmonies that had never existed, as billions of beings learned that consciousness itself could grow beyond any limits they had ever imagined. The universe, for the first time in its long history, was finally learning how to surprise itself.